Hi everyone, it's Christine here from Ever After Paper Crafts, and I am here with part 2 of this galaxy background card that we worked on. In the first part I showed you how I did the galaxy background, and in this second part I'm going to show you how I did the grass, and we're going to quickly color the critters and then put the card together. And once again, I am using this Fawn stamp set called Upon a Star. It's brand new from their summer 2017 release, and it's fabulous. I absolutely adore this stamp set. So let me show you, this is the background that we created in part 1 of the video, completely finished. How cool is that? The only thing that I did is I did add some of the constellations from the stamp set, and all I did was I used my Misty. You don't have to use a stamping tool, you can use an acrylic block, and I stamped them in Versamark and heat embossed them with white embossing powder. I use the white embossing powder from Simon Says Stamp, but you can use whatever you have in your stash, and it really gives, it makes those constellations really stand out on this background. You can also see, as I'm tilting this, some of the shimmer and shine that we got by using those Gansai Tambi watercolor paints to do some of the splotching that we did, along with the acrylic white. So I wanted to show you what it looked like all dry before we put this card together. Now, the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to create our grass. And that's really easy to do. I mentioned in part 1 of this tutorial that I wanted this whole scene to take up the entirety of a card base. So 5.5 by 4.25. And I just used a large stitched rectangle die from Fawn to cut this out. And I also went ahead and did that on the panel that we worked on in part 1. I'm going to cut another one of these out using Bristol Smooth white cardstock, and then I took one of the 3 simple grassy hillsides that you get in the Fawn die set. I placed that along the bottom of the white rectangle that I cut out, used some non-pour tape or low-tack tape rather, to kind of stick it down, and came out with this. So this is the little hill that's going to go at the bottom of our sky scene that our critters will be sitting on. So what I'm going to do is now I'm going to bring over a piece of scratch paper, and we're going to do our inking. So I used 2 different colors of distress ink to create this. I used Mowed Lawn and Pine Needles. I thought these 2 kind of went together in a really fun way. So let me grab the little pads from the bottom where I store them, and we'll go ahead and get started. I'm going to coat the whole thing first with the lighter of the 2 colors, which is the Mowed Lawn. So I'm going to cover this whole kind of hillside with this Mowed Lawn ink. Just lightly, you don't have to have a heavy hand in this. Just enough to cover it up so the viewer doesn't know that you started with a white piece of cardstock, which is kind of cool. It's kind of fun to create your own cardstock colors with these distress inks. Okay, so I'm going to set this one aside. Now I'm going to get out the pine needle and get the pad ready for that. And for the pine needle, we're just kind of going to go, we're going to leave some shading, some lighter color in the middle, and we're just kind of going to go around and just blend this together very well. So we're just going to kind of, it's just to add some interest. You could totally leave this step out and just do one green color if you wanted to. It's up to you. I just kind of like at least 2 colors when I'm mixing distress inks because it gives that look of shading, you know, of light and dark colors combined together, which I really like. So I'm just kind of going around here. Now let me go back to the Mowed Lawn, and we're going to just blend this together in one final push through to get everything nice and blended. And I did want it to be a little bit darker green too. That's kind of another reason why I added that final color, because it is a dark scene. You know, it is supposed to be night outside, so I did want it to be, I didn't want bright green grass, in other words, where it would kind of look like it was daylight out. I wanted it to be a little bit darker. Now the last step to creating my grass is I wanted to create a little shadow underneath where the critters are going to be sitting. So I pulled back out my black soot ink and a sponge dauber. And I know that my critters are going to be sitting in the middle of this panel right up here. So I just did a little bit of shading with my black soot ink rather, underneath this, this little middle section of grass. And once I added my critters, I actually found I needed to add a little more of this shading, and I went back and did that. So we'll see if we need to do that when we get the critters colored and on this panel. But for now, we're just going to kind of lightly put some black ink down. Okay, so that looks really cute. And so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my distress ink, my distress sprayer rather, and I'm going to just lightly spritz this panel. And I'm going to grab a paper towel and use the paper towel to just dab up the water, and it just gives that neat distress look. And there you have it. So we're going to set this aside to dry, and now we're going to color our critters really quickly. For the fox, let me bring the original card back over. For the fox, I only used 2 colors, and I used 3 colors for the bunny. So very simple coloring that we're doing here today, and very quick coloring. I already went ahead and stamped the 2 critters, and I just stamped them with Hero Arts black dye ink, which is water marker and watercolor friendly ink. So let's start with the fox. For the fox, I used 2 of my zig markers. I used deep red and brown. And that's kind of an odd combination, but I'll explain why I use those colors. And I also, of course, will be using my water brush. Have my paper towel handy. If you've seen me do other zig coloring tutorials before, you'll know that I always have my paper towel handy so I can scribble off the tip of my water brush as I go between colors. So to color this fox, foxes tend to have like a reddish brown color to them, and I couldn't find just one color alone that I liked that really kind of looked like a fox to me. So I played around with the reds were too red, the browns weren't red enough, so I thought, well, I'll just mix a brown and a red together. And so I experimented with several different combos, and this is the one that I came up with that I really liked. So I laid down, as you can see here, an outline of some brown ink, and it's just brown marker. Then I'm going to put the red kind of right to next to the line that I just laid down of the brown. And then just to get that color off the tip, I'm going to scribble off the red marker onto my paper towel, and now I'm going to take my water brush and we're going to blend this color together and then out into this white space to create our shading. And I thought that this color combination, as crazy as it sounded initially, really created a pretty neat color for a fox. So I was really pleased with how it came out. So we're just pulling this color out and into this white space to give us our shading. So now I'm going to scribble off on my paper towel. And another hint too, when you're working with the zig markers, sometimes, if you can see here on this, it gets a little bit blotty because, again, I'm using Bristol Smooth cardstock. It's great for the zigs, but it's not watercolor paper. So sometimes the paper will pill just slightly. Take your paper towel and blot your image, and that will fix that for you. And now we're going to do the tail. And again, this is very quick coloring, but these images are adorable and very suitable for quick zig marker or Copic, whatever your preference is, coloring, and still come out looking fabulous. So I just put some brown again and some red, and we're going to pull this color out into the white space to give us our reddish brown coloring for our fox. And I was just really pleased. So don't be afraid. I guess the takeaway from this is don't be afraid to kind of go crazy and create new colors with your zig markers. That is something that these markers are great at. They really make it fun and easy for you to do that. It's almost like you're working with, well, it is like you're working with actual watercolor paints in your ability to mix palettes together and create new colors. Now for the tip of his tail, it's usually kind of whitish, but I wanted it to have just a tiny little bit of color, so I just put a tiny little bit of brown right there at the tip and then pulled it down into the rest of the tail, the white of the tail. So it has just a little bit of color, but not too much. And then for his foot, I just put a little bit of brown and a little bit of red, just like the rest of his body. and then used my, my watercolor brush to pull that color up. And before I forget, I want to wipe off the red marker on my paper towel so it'll be ready to go with clear red ink the next time I use it. Okay, let's move over to the bunny. I use two main colors for the bunny. I use gray and light gray, and then I use a pink for his nose, which I'll get to in a moment. So I'm going to take the gray first, and much like the fox, we're just going to kind of go around the side of his head where it's going to be darkest in color. And then I'm going to take the light gray and just do a little line kind of next to that gray, the darker gray color. And I'm just using a circular motion to kind of blend those two colors together. And then my water brush is going to do the remainder of the work. So I'm using a circular motion with my water brush to pull those colors out into the middle of his head. All right. Now what it's time to do his ears. So I'm going to take the gray, which is the darker of my two colors. I always like to start with the darkest of my markers first, lay that color down, then take the lighter, put a little line next to the dark, and this is the light gray color, and then take my water brush and mix it all together and pull it out into the white space so we have our blending and our shading there. I really like to work that way with these markers. I have seen some crafters go light to dark. For me, using these particular markers, dark to light works best, but just play around with them and do what works for you. So now I'm going to take the darker gray again and just kind of go around the rest of his body here, just scribbling on some color under his ears and around his little backside here. Now I'm going to take the light gray, do the same in a little scribble next to where I just laid down the darker gray color. And then once we get that kind of mixed in a circular motion fashion, we're going to take our water brush and continue to mix the colors together and then pull the color up and fill in that white space. All right, and there we have it. I missed a little bit on his ear here, so I'm going to pull that out and fill in that ear. Okay, and now we just need to do his feet. So I'm going to take the darker gray color again, just put a tiny little line at the bottom of his feet, and then same with the lighter gray color, and then use our water brush to pull that color up into the remainder of the white space. And now for his tail, just much like the fox's tail, usually the little tails are white, but I didn't want it to be completely stark white, so I put just a tiny little bit of light gray and then blended that all together on his tail and covered the whole tail with a tiny little white gray, so get it just a little bit of color, but it's meant to look white. Then I'm taking an almond pink and I'm just coloring in his nose with that color. Now one thing that I like to do is I like to take a Jelly Roll pen. I just got this one at Michael's. It's Sakura Jelly Roll Fine Black Pen, and I use this to darken his eyes so they really pop, because sometimes when you put the marker coloring over it, the eyes can lose some of their pop. So I just took my jelly pen and colored over his eyes, and the fox, you can't see his eyes, but I'm going to do the same thing for his nose. And it just allows those eyes and nose to pop just a little bit. Okay, so that's done. The next step would be to cut these out. As I mentioned in the first video, the stamp set does come, you can purchase coordinating dies separately. That's what I did, and I used those dies to cut out my little critters here. And I did that off camera with two that I colored prior to coming on camera. So those are the two that I colored earlier. And pardon me. But of course, if you don't have the coordinating dies, you can simply fussy cut them with your scissors. So now what I want to do is I already lined the back of our panel that we did all the watercoloring on with foam tape. So I'm going to peel this foam tape off, and I've already cut and scored a A2 sized note card. A2 size is your standard card. It's 5.5 by 4.25. And this one happens to be a top fold card, so I'm going to just push it down. This just helps me center it on the top of the panel, or on the top of the note card rather. So I'm just going to center that down, and there we go. And I use a lot of foam tape simply because this was watercolored, and it can warp just a little bit. So I use lots of foam tape to keep it nice and even so it will go through the mail better. So let me pick up all of the backings. Here are the trash backings of the foam tape, and let me put my water pen away so I don't make a mess. And now we're going to bring over our grass panel that we just did. I'm going to turn it upside down, bring over my tape runner, and I'm going to put some adhesive on the back of our grass panel. Flip this over, and we're just going to line this grass panel up with the very bottom of our card base. And of course, you could have done this before you put the panel on the card base if you wanted to. I just kind of wanted to have everything down on the card base at this point, but just do whatever works for you. So there it is with our grass down. And now we just have to adhere our animals and our sentiment. So this is what it's going to look like with our little animals. So I used some foam tape for my animals. I used this big, huge roll of foam tape. I got mine from Amazon, and it's actually a really good bang for your buck if you go through foam tape like I do. And I really do go through foam tape like crazy. So for me, it's definitely a good buy. I think it's like $20 for this huge roll, something like that. So for me, it's kind of a necessity with how much I work and how many cards I kind of do and how much foam tape I use, because I like to use a lot of dimension on my cards, and I like it to be even dimensions so the cards go through the mail well. So I'm just peeling that backing off of this foam tape. Let me move the foam tape out of the way. We are done with it, and I'm going to put the little fox down. Let's get into the camera view here. I'm going to put the fox down, and I'm going to put the little bunny down. There we go. Cuteness. Isn't that adorable? They're so cute. And I think I am going to add just a little bit more black ink for the shadow. Remember, I had mentioned that might be necessary depending on you know, where I ultimately ended up placing the little animals once everything was put together. So I'm going to add some under the bunny. It didn't get as far under the bunny as I would have liked. So that should do it. Let me kind of take a look at that from the front now. Yeah, I think that looks good. I just wanted some shading underneath their little tushies so that they look like they're, you know, the stars and the starlight would have created a shadow behind them. And I just kind of wanted to create that as best I could in the card design. Okay, so now some of the last things to do are to add our sentiment. Here is the card that I made, the sample card that I made. And as you can see, I used the sentiment, "Our love is written in the stars." So I went ahead off camera just to save time for the video and stamped that and embossed it with white embossing powder. And I added some foam tape to the back. And we just need to peel off the backing of the foam tape here and stick this down. And I just stuck it along the bottom here. And it just says, "Our love is written in the stars." Very cute. Okay, and that's just about it, guys. The last steps would be to just add some sequins, and I also added some star sequins on the final card. I'm not going to take your time to do that for purposes of the video, but if you are interested, I used Pretty Pink Posh clear confetti mix for the clear white sequins, and I used Lucy's Cards Nautical Sparkle for the blue sequins. And so that would be the final step in creating this card. Okay guys, that's it. I hope that you enjoyed this video and that you will try this galaxy background. Thanks so much for watching and have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.